Welcome back to Ready for Merge, the podcast about the evolution of Bitcoin and Ethereum. I'm your host, Christine D. Kim. Today's show is a Meet the Devs interview with another full-time Ethereum developer, Phil Ngo. He works at Chainsafe Systems, and he helps to build and maintain the Ethereum consensus layer client, Lodestar. We recorded this interview last summer for a mini series that I created for my Substack for premium subscribers. It profiled the lives of various Ethereum developers from different client teams and their journey into Ethereum protocol development. Now, that mini series, the Meet the Devs mini series, has since grown to encompass and profile some Bitcoin protocol developers on this Ready for Merge podcast show. I'm very grateful to Phil for him having shared his origin story into Ethereum with me many months ago, and for helping me to kickstart the Meet the Devs mini-series. He was one of the first, I think, after I interviewed Besu developer Justin on the series, and it's quite inspiring, I guess, to look back on how the Meet the Devs miniseries started, and to know now that Meet the Devs is a long-running series on this podcast, on the Ready for Merge podcast, and one that I think many Ready for Merge listeners are now familiar with in terms of the format and the style of these Meet the Devs interviews. Before I get started with today's show, I wanted to give two quick announcements. The first is that I'm pleased to announce I am organizing my second All Protocol Devs meetup this Friday, May 1st. This is going to be a virtual meetup hosted over Google Meets, so very accessible for protocol developers, researchers, and enthusiasts to join from all over the world. And the discussions are going to focus on the fallout from the Kelpdao and Layer Zero exploit, which I talked about on last week's Ready for Merge show. So if you're interested in taking part in these discussions and joining for the event, please head over to Luma and search All Protocol Devs. You'll be able to see the event page and more details about the event there. Second, if you are interested in sponsoring an upcoming Ready for Merge podcast episode and speaking directly to an audience of protocol developers and enthusiasts, please reach out via the email that is listed in the show notes of today's episode. Now, onwards with the show for today.
My name is Philip Ngo. I'm the project manager of the Lodestar consensus client over at Chainsafe.
And Philip, can I call you Phil?
Yeah, Phil's good. That's my nickname.
And Phil, can you share what would you say has been your biggest contribution to Ethereum thus far in your career as a project manager for the Lodestar client?
Honestly, one of the biggest moments of my life was actually completing the merge with the team. So I was with the team in Berlin where we celebrated and saw the merge actually happen.
How long have you been working on Ethereum with the Lodestar team?
So with the Lodestar team, I've been with them since July of 2021. So I'm a bit of an old guy now.
And were you working on Ethereum before that, or was that your first foray into Ethereum development?
Yeah, so I have a pretty interesting story of how I got into blockchain. So I'm actually from Toronto, Canada, and we were very lucky to have an early Bitcoin scene back in 2012, 2013. So I actually started with just stumbling into a Bitcoin meetup in 2013. And then from that point, there was a lot of that was where my curiosity sort of sparked. I kind of came into the Bitcoin scene around the time of the Mt. Gox hack. And from there, I was able to sort of understand and dig a little bit into what kind of world I was digging myself into. I understood the concept of just things like fractional reserve banking and all these things. And I came from a IT background. I used to work with the Canadian Armed Forces, which is our military, doing IT stuff. So I am not new to things like cryptography. It really helped me actually understand what Bitcoin was trying to do quite early on.
Mm.
So once you start digging yourself into this like rabbit hole and you start understanding what Bitcoin is trying to do and why it's trying to disrupt the current financial system, um, which is a whole other topic about, like money printing and stuff like this. But through there, with this group of people in like these meetups, that's where I met a lot of the early day people. So like Joe Lubin used to hang around Toronto, same with Vitalik. So I was able to sort of see what Vitalik was trying to do when he published his white paper. His white paper was published, I think, around 2014. And around that time, it was very much like, I think this is Bitcoin 2.0. And that was like, I saw myself and was like, this is great. Um, I'm going to keep going with this and see where this goes because I totally see the use case of a application type blockchain in which you can deal with more things than just digital gold, which was what Bitcoin was trying to do.
Yeah.
Um, and then 2015, I just kept learning all these things. The first coin I ever mined was Dogecoin, just for fun, with like a PC gaming computer that was just sitting idle.
You're a true OG, a true
Yeah,
OG crypto
the only
person.
the only problem with that was I was so early that I didn't really see like what Dogecoin was trying to do. So like everything that I mined for Dogecoin is gone. Like the wallets are gone. Like I didn't think it would be worth anything. Like it was just for fun.
If you didn't do that with your Bitcoin,
Did not do that with Bitcoin and did not do that with my Ether. So luckily those two things like I managed to keep a hold of.
then you win some, you lose some. When you're
Exactly.
that early, you got to have some losses in your story.
Exactly. And I mean, at the end of the day, like, I'm sure the person who bought pizza with Bitcoin is thinking the same thing. But at the end of the day, like the knowledge that you gain is actually worth so much more. Um,
100%.
wouldn't be in this industry if it wasn't for me dabbling down the rabbit hole in 2013, learning about Bitcoin. And I was lucky enough to experience things like the DAO back in 2015. I was actually a DAO like token holder and saw Ethereum and Ethereum Classic basically go through their split and was there to see all of this, which was great to see firsthand.
So when did you go full time into crypto? Was there like a risk in moving from being the IT person with the armed forces to becoming a full time like crypto as your career kind of thing? Like tell me how that transition happened.
Yeah, so definitely there's like a huge issue with people leaving the military or leaving their full-time job in general to do something risky. And I think that's like something that people struggle with in when they should, I guess, pull the plug and actually go into crypto full time. It was a lot less stable back then. So you would be basically just jumping into like a startup, not knowing if you're going to have a job by the end of the year. And I guess like the difference here as well. Um, oops, did I lose you,
You still
Christine?
there?
Sorry,
I think so. There was a little bit of a lag.
yeah, sorry about that. My internet can be a bit choppy sometimes. I'm actually syncing up a Besu node right now. Maybe
Of course you are. This is going to be included in the interview. That is very real. Some people
yeah,
at first can't even turn on videos because they're running these nodes in the background. And I told them, I said,
I
there's
know.
some priorities here.
Maybe
It's
before
fun.
you do these phone calls, you should tell people to like stop running their nodes or like stop syncing them, hogging all the bandwidth and stuff.
All right. I will forgive you this once, but when we do a follow-up, you're going to have to give me a little bit more of your bandwidth. But
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Okay. So where were we? We're talking about, I guess, the jump
yes,
from
and when it was, like what year was this?
yeah. So I actually officially left the military in 2018. I actually didn't jump right into like a crypto job. I was actually trying to run a startup with two other partners looking into security tokens, like financial instruments on the blockchain, which is now happening and not back in like 2018 when I left.
You were
So
too early.
I was too early. A lot of these things, it's timing, and
That's right.
it's not always going to work out in that sense. But what I hear from a lot of people as well is like, how do I get a job? I guess in crypto, and when is the right time for me to leave my safe, secure, full time job and actually jump into this crazy industry that like is basically like a big startup for a lot of people. I was lucky. I will say that like in my experience, I was an early Ethereum holder. So as 2017 came around, it really created enough of a stable base for me to actually jump ship. So I know this is not like a typical story that I guess a lot of people would be able to do, unless of course prices just keep going up. But I was able to sort of know that the military was not in my future, and that this industry, if I put more time into this industry, I'm basically going to be securing a future for myself, not just financially, but also this is going to be the future. And the more I learn about it today, the better I'll be and the more valuable I'll be tomorrow.
Hmm.
So this is why this was sort of my thinking back then as to like why I need to just leave my secure government job and actually just like dive in headfirst into this new industry. But I
Yeah.
get it's hard for a lot of people because they have bills to pay, they got families to feed, so it can be quite difficult.
Yeah, but you were calculating the risk. You were like not doing this just out of a whim. This was like a real, you were working up to this and you saw the long-term potential in like what you could build if you did start investing full time in crypto.
Exactly. And like I wouldn't say that I wasn't doing anything during that time either. Like I was always doing stuff on the side in crypto. I was going to meetups, I was meeting people, I was talking to them, I was contributing and it doesn't even have to be code, right? It can be like helping a local blockchain business in some way. You don't need to necessarily be a software engineer to contribute in this industry. So that was like a really big thing for me to really I would suggest a lot of new people to actually dabble their toes in this industry by actually doing stuff on the side. Um y- if you have the ability to keep your full-time job and do this on the side, you will eventually find the right time for you to actually jump ship into a crypto job full time. I
Yeah,
think
that's good advice.
yeah, you'll definitely know. Everybody's making their own calculated risks. Everybody has their own situations, I guess, in regards to like their finances and their family life and such.
Yeah. Well, I want to dig a little bit deeper into what you said about how you don't necessarily need to be like a software engineer or programmer, be very heavily into cryptography and know the ins and outs of the way public blockchains work. Can you talk more about your role and what you do for the Lodestar client? Because I think it's a little different from what some of the other developers in this series um, do. Many of them are like working a lot on implementing specifications from the GitHub and just kind of in the weeds of Ethereum protocol code. Phil, as I understand, your role is a little bit different. Can you talk more about that?
Yeah, so I'm not really like a software engineer or a programmer by trade. I never went to school for computer engineering, computer science, or anything like that. A lot of the stuff that I learned was very self-taught. Um, Not to say that I can read some code, and I can understand this stuff, but this was due to like, years of practicing and just looking at stuff and trying to understand it. Um, for me as a project manager though, my specialties is really in like operational management. So when I was in the military, I had a role as what's called an air operations officer. So I was actually working for the Air Force, dealing with fleets of Canadian Air Force aircraft. So a lot of the operational aspects and management was actually learned through my job as a second lieutenant in the military. And that skill set I brought to the crypto industry and to Lodestar specifically as their project manager. to, of course, ensure that with all the different things that we're doing, we hit our milestones, we hit our goals, things don't fall through the pipes. And then kind of it merges in with, I guess, my understanding and my love for technology, like being able to like ensure that like we do proper beta testing on our Lodestar release candidates, ensuring we have like a proper pipeline for testing, and ensuring we actually get the most efficiency out of our engineers, and making sure that they have the tools that they need to be able to do what they do. Um, and I think that's like the biggest thing that I sort of contribute here, is just making sure that like we are always keeping up to date with the specifications, we're contributing to them, we are always in in sort of synchronicity with the development of Ethereum, and that things don't necessarily fall behind in the development of the Lodestar client. There's also a lot of other things that are, I guess, non-engineering management based as well. Like I do deal with a lot of like the finances and stuff like this as well, to like make sure that like an open source client like ours that depends on public goods funding is also, you know, like funded through the years that we're doing development, and just making sure like the guys can basically get to the conferences that they need to go to. So there's a lot of like support tasks and support roles that is underneath all of the awesome software engineering that's happening that most people see.
Tell me a little bit about how you came into that role specifically. When you first started to contribute to the Lodestar client, did it start off kind of more as like this open source, like side project thing, or was this a little bit of a more formal, like role and position that had already been created and needed to be filled? I think sometimes people get a little bit um, maybe a little bit daunted at the fact that this is like such a huge open source project that the Ethereum protocol is. There's all these clients, and um, I think the pathways to contributing to protocol development are so different. So I'm curious to know, like, how did you get into that project management role with Lodestar?
Yeah, it's definitely very different. I can give you like these two examples. So for my journey, it was actually through a job posting, but I was also like a referral. I knew somebody at Chainsafe already, through a mutual friend. So he was already working at Chainsafe and basically notified me that there is a role opening up for project managing the Lodestar consensus client. So I went through like a traditional job interview application process to work at Chainsafe. However, there's a lot of engineers that actually come to us not from that same pipeline. A lot of the people that we find are actually people who have been either contributing elsewhere in the ecosystem, or just have showed up in our GitHub and started wanting to contribute. So um, I can't say if this is the same for the other client teams, but at least for Lodestar, we do keep an eye out for talent when people are contributing. So when people show up on our repository and are actually showing up at like even our stand-ups, which are open for everybody to attend, and we see them putting in pull requests for solving an issue that we have, like a lot of our engineers here will look at stuff like this and they'll be like, you know, this person looks pretty promising. We should keep an eye on them. There's like some other people on the team that actually got hired this way. Some of
Any
them,
particular developers we might know from the, or I might know from the all core developer calls?
yeah. So actually, Gajinder G11 Tech actually showed up in our repository in like 2020 or something like that. Just started contributing and learning, and then we eventually hired him. And I guess, yeah, that's one way. Another way as well is also, so like a third example was conferences. Conferences are a great way to
Mm.
network and to get an idea as to like, where do I fit in? How can I contribute to what people are looking for? So two of our engineers, Matthew and Nico, we actually met in Bogota at DevCon. So after talking with them, they actually donated a bit of their time to actually solve some of our issues so that we can get a gauge of like their skill set and stuff like this. So like we didn't necessarily do a technical interview with them. We kind of just looked at their work. And because they contribute good work, we're like, okay, these guys are great. Let's take them off like freelance. We'll sometimes hire people on freelance as well. And then actually like give them a contract to work with us like full time. So there are many ways. I think generally, as long as there's like somebody that's like watching on the other client teams, we're always looking out for talent. And if you can show your work out in the public and what you're able to do, that's basically an application on its own.
One of the parts that I think is also a little bit under talked about or known widely for people that are just jumping into this space are also the types of entities that actually employ developers and people that work full time on the Ethereum protocol through clients. So through this series, obviously, we're profiling people who work for the Ethereum Foundation, which is just a nonprofit organization. There's developers employed by Consensus, which is kind of this huge like umbrella of Ethereum, various Ethereum tools and services. Can you talk a little bit about what Chainsafe is and what it does and why it was created?
Yeah, so Chainsafe started in 2017, and I think they started off as just a really small like dev shop working on like little things here and there. They helped develop I think their first real client was Block Geeks. I don't know if you know Block Geeks. It's run by Vitalik's dad. Um Dimitri. So like I think that was the first check they ever took, if I'm correct. But then they were always doing like these little things here and there, and they kind of just ended up doing like a bunch of development in these protocols. So Chainsafe itself is involved with not just Ethereum, but they do stuff for the Filecoin system. They do stuff for Polkadot. So they actually have they're kind of like a dev house basically. They at some point they also did like smart contract auditing. They had like a gaming SDK. We also like managed Web3 JS for a period of time until it stopped receiving funding. So like whatever I guess like we can contribute to in the ecosystem, not just protocol, but also infrastructure. Um, Chainsafe would love to be a part of that, I guess. So like we also at this current time run Lido validators as well with the Lodestar client. So we are a Lido node operator in their
Mm.
curated staking module.
That's really interesting because I think there's many different types of stakeholders in the ecosystem. And obviously, I'm focusing very much on client teams, client developers. But it's interesting that Chainsafe is also running validators, Lido validators, because that's also validators are huge. Another kind of stakeholder in the Ethereum ecosystem. There's, of course, end users and dApp developers. Uh, Curious to know your views on kind of the most influential players that influence like the technology of Ethereum. Ethereum very much has like a much more ambitious vision than Bitcoin does in terms of what it wants to be as a technology. And because of that, there's like no sacred cows. Parts of the protocol are constantly changing. And in my view, I think, Ethereum really is a technocracy. It's really you guys, the client teams that are influencing Ethereum the most. But just curious to hear your thoughts on like where do you see the role of client developers in Ethereum's evolution?
Yeah, so that's pretty interesting that you say that because I'm not necessarily like a big fan of just tried to say like I wield power because I work with core devs. I don't think that that's like necessarily like an appropriate view because we don't really control Ethereum in that sense. Like I actually think like yes, we do have a say, but we are not the protocol. And I think this is like also a big aspect of why we're such big proponents of like client diversity, but also diversity of the stakeholders in the ecosystem. It's no longer Geth is no longer the only execution client team. You know, like there used to be a running joke that whatever Geth was the spec, and
Right.
that's no longer the case, right? So the stakeholder aspect of things, I think it's really just uh, we all keep each other in check in the sense that like um we have to be, I guess, like talking and communicating to the various stakeholders, which in my mind are also users, builders, and infrastructure people as well. So like whenever we do hard forks or any upgrades on the protocol, it's important that we get a lot of feedback from Lido as an example, because they run so many validators, but also from the like builders themselves. So now we need to pay attention to like the block proposal pipeline or the block building pipeline. So we need to be having good communications with the Flashbots people to sort of envision like, okay, like the out of protocol block production pipeline, like how does our changes affect that world now? And then same with like the users and the builders, right? So like UX is a huge thing that we've been wanting to fix, but we have no idea. Like not all of us are like super heavy users of Ethereum, surprisingly. So like we don't always know what people are thinking as like a dApp builder or like a Ethereum user. So it's the synergy of all these different stakeholders that make it work and keep each other in check is the way that I sort of see it. And part of the problem we had previously was that core developers were kind of working in their own silo. So we wouldn't necessarily be like implementing the best UX because we never got that feedback from the dApp builders or the users about like how much they need like smart contract wallets, as an example, like how big of an issue it is dealing with like EOAs and just like the security flaws of like ERC20 tokens and stuff like this. Um, so really, I don't necessarily love it when people say that, core developers are basically like the protocol or have like such large control over the protocol. We are a small piece of the puzzle. Yes, we do have some influence, but we are not the protocol, if
Mm.
that makes sense.
I think that's important to highlight, especially from the angle of people that may want to contribute to protocol development with the hopes of really impacting the evolution of Ethereum and impacting the type of technology Ethereum becomes. You're so right that there are so many stakeholders that shape Ethereum without touching the protocol development when we think about like layer twos and like you said, the app developers. Um, and I maybe if I don't call it power, I can call it a very large responsibility on the people that are directly changing the code of Ethereum, like the client teams that are implementing new releases, with so much value and uh, so many different stakeholders really impacted by the decisions that your team is making. I mean, how would you say? Is there, how would you say that you've handled, I guess, like the responsibility and the pressures and the optics that come with that? I want to be real about the fact that there is a little bit of um, maybe a certain kind of like pedestal that people may put client teams and developers on in the ecosystem. But like you said, it's in reality, it may not be the case. I've heard from other developers too that burnout is a very real thing. We've definitely seen um, drama at times between client teams and core developers on social media platforms. I mean, can you talk a little bit more about like the responsibility that comes with participating in and contributing to Ethereum protocol development in such an open way, open space?
Yeah, I would say like a lot of the people that I've met in protocol are here because they care and they love Ethereum and they care about where Ethereum goes in the future. I will say that like, protocol engineers, like we don't necessarily like make Facebook salaries or anything like this. So a lot of the people who are like intrigued about making lots of money, this protocol is probably not the right place for you. A lot of our clients are funded through like open source and open source funding. And basically, like, as you know, value doesn't necessarily accrue back down to the L1 layer. So a lot of the times, like people are here because they actually just love Ethereum and want to see its success as the base layer of global settlement. I and I think that I don't know where am I trying to go with this now. um,
I
I
see where
think
you're going though. That
yeah,
it's really most people that are contributing aren't doing it for the fame of it. Like aren't
yeah,
doing it because they really do want to, you know, they really want, I guess, like you said, the power of being able to control something when really it can't be controlled and really, there's just so many other factors at play.
yeah. That's a good point because if we were basically the sole, group of people that controlled the protocol, it first of all optically doesn't look good. Secondly, I'm sure that would raise a lot of concerns in regards to like securities and stuff and regulation and all that. Like there's nobody that really truly controls this ecosystem, and that's also why I'm still here. Because like
Mm,
I hate to say it, but like, sometimes like you'll see with like massive hacks, a lot of people will try to convert whatever digital assets they have into Ethereum because they know like Ethereum is the most decentralized in that like we can't actually revert transactions or we can't actually like censor them. So unfortunately, a lot of people will try to, take some of their funds and, bring it to Ethereum because of that. But that really goes to show like how much we really don't control the ecosystem at all.
yeah. Phil, would you say that you have kind of like a predefined, would you say like breaking point for what would make you potentially not want to contribute to the ecosystem anymore?
I think for me, it would be if we lost a lot of the talent I think that we have in the ecosystem. I think maybe what would be a catalyst event for me would be probably some of our researchers leaving for other blockchains. There's a lot of people trying to push Ethereum forward, and I think like their vision is actually what keeps me here. Ethereum is like, even though it has taken a pivot in the last like couple months, it's actually given me a lot more certainty that I'm in the right place because Tomas Xiaowei and the new executives of the Ethereum Foundation have actually outlined a pretty solid vision, and actually the most vision that we've gotten in the last few years of where we're trying to take Ethereum.
Hmm.
Um, so I think like if people like them started stepping down, or if we struggle to deliver, I would say, um, those would be like some very big red flags for me of Ethereum. I'm, I'm not seeing that.
Yeah. I mean, hopefully none of those things happen. Hopefully, the talent and the developer ecosystem continues to grow and thrive. Um, we've talked a lot about what you do as a project manager, kind of your role and how you got there, as well as your views on the optics around working on client development. Just kind of zooming out a little bit, do you think there's any underserved areas of protocol development, maybe outside of um, client teams and client software development that you think there needs to be more attention on? There needs to be more kind of like participation and focus on that you think would be um, that you wish more people knew about and cared about?
Yeah, I actually am really thinking hard these days about how we onboard the next billion people. And I think a lot of people are thinking about this. Like base is a good example. I even think that's like their tagline or something. But it's true that like we don't have a catalyst application that really sells the blockchain for why people really need it. I think a lot of the times, like we are just thinking about like solving like these problems, but they don't really like attribute to like how does that make the everyday person's life a little bit better. So like as an example, one of the main reasons why I got into blockchain was because the blockchain was trying to upend the way that we do financial payments and stuff like that, having some transparency in much money issuance and destroying the monopoly that the governments and states have on money. And so like money printing and all that stuff being a problem. And that was sort of like my main thing of like trying to basically um I guess get into this ecosystem. But I think where we really don't see I guess the Catalyst app, whatever it is. So like the way I think about it is what made the internet a big thing for a lot of people. And I think a lot of people's first step into understanding the value of the internet was maybe something like email, I would think. Um, I don't know if we have this yet with Ethereum. Some could probably say like it could be DeFi, but DeFi is a small subset of people in the population. Whereas like email is used by literally like everyone in the world. So
Mm.
what is that application um, that you could sort of compare like email to internet? What is that application that now applies to the blockchain? So I've been really trying to hard to figure out what that is, and I don't really know if I know what that is. um, but I think the underserved aspect is really trying to like figure out a way to showcase the value of a blockchain to the everyday person, uh,
Yeah.
which kind of goes into like I guess adoption and stuff like that.
I gotta say, I think there's just been, I mean, even with what I do and my focus in the series, it's all about the infrastructure of the Ethereum protocol, people building infrastructure with L2s, the restaking. A lot of this is not the user facing apps. I think that I agree with you that there is this kind of still a gap in innovation and between innovation and what we're building. And I've heard the argument a lot that if you build, then the apps will come, but we really haven't like jumped over to that next phase quite yet. And I can't tell if this is really at this point, I can't tell if the problem really is that we don't have the infra because it seems like we've been focused on infra for so long and that's all we've been doing. I would have hoped that there would have been more apps by now.
Yeah. Well, I think like a lot of the times, like it just takes like it takes a little bit of time, but as builders push the limits of what Ethereum is capable of, we kind of tr- try to chug along behind it, but sometimes we're a little bit behind. So like I think what really woke us up in terms of why Ethereum needs to focus on scalability is things like CryptoKitties or like these like ICOs or airdrops, like that innovation actually helped push us into thinking why we need to actually scale the L1. And I mean, like, I think it's kind of like the same aspect of like YouTube wouldn't have existed on the internet if we couldn't figure out a way to like expand the pipe for more bandwidth and for more like being able to like transmit things or a lot of things in like very limited technology, so like copper lines or whatever, and then we eventually went to like cable or coax and then to like fiber. Same idea I guess with like Ethereum, in the sense that like we need these applications that choke Ethereum for us to really realize like, okay, maybe the infrastructure is not there yet. How do we scale so that we can handle the microtransactions? Like the fact that like we weren't able to handle like Visa transaction speed throughput is like a big thing that like if you want payment processors and you want people to be transacting on stable coins, we need to be able to support that infrastructure.
Yeah.
So maybe the infrastructure is there today. Maybe this is why like TradFi is starting to look at us a little bit better, or starting to dive in a little bit more. But there's still a lot of optimizations that we need to make in protocol to like really like 10x this thing.
Yeah, and it also emphasizes, to your point, the need for that positive feedback loop between developers and app builders, between the other stakeholders of like not the importance of not working in a silo, to be able to see what's going on and actively like react to how people are using the technology. Um, yeah, I think it's Ethereum is such a the future of Ethereum is just so uh it's so when I look at it, it's just so unclear. Like so much is still to be seen and done. I think that's what also makes things so exciting. uh Phil, I guess the other thing that I wanted to briefly touch on too is what it's like working in a very global, like decentralized community. You said you're based out of Canada. um I know a lot of like Ethereum researchers and developers are based out of places in Europe, and I'm based out of New York. Is most of like your communications, is all of that kind of done online? Can you share a little bit more about what the day to day looks like being a person who works on Chainsafe from Canada?
Yeah, so like as far as I know, many companies in the Web3 space are like fully remote. So at least here at like ChainSafe, we don't limit ourselves in terms of like who we hire based on like their location or anything like that. So like even on my team alone, I have a guy in the United States, one in Berlin, one in Singapore, one in Vietnam, one in India. So like we are like all over the world. I think at one point, ChainSafe had people from like 23 different countries or something like that. So it's very interesting. Like I think the hardest thing about working in a global team is really the synchronous calls. So like
Right.
we really had to like manage how we go about working together. We try to do things as async as possible, but some things require some collaboration. And that is probably one of the hardest things to navigate. It does require some sacrifices from people, but you've heard of the concept of etho clock, which is
No, I have not heard of this.
etho clock is like basically like 2 p.m. UTC. So that's like
Oh, yes.
all the calls, a lot of the Ethereum calls happen around that time because it's the time when the majority of people are still somewhat awake. Ar-
Hilarious.
Arguably, like it's very hard for the Australians, so I feel really bad for like the Sigma Prime team and like some of the other people that work there from that location because like even at ETH o'clock, I think it's somewhere like midnight in Australia. But like we have a guy on our team, NC, who works from Vancouver, and over there, I believe it's like -7
Yeah,
UTC
7
daylight
a.m.
savings and -8 when we're off daylight savings. So like to be able to like balance this has been very difficult because it's like really late for like our guy in Singapore and Vietnam, but then really early for our guy in Vancouver. So
Yeah.
there was even one time I think on Web3 JS, I worked with a guy who was in Hawaii, and that was the worst global time zone to work with.
You
Um,
somebody's losing sleep. No
yeah,
matter when you place it, somebody is losing sleep.
exactly. But the great thing about this is it basically means that like your talent pool is global. So you can be a developer in Nigeria or in like Zimbabwe or some like Southeast Asia island, like I don't know, Philippines or something like that. It doesn't matter where you're from, as long as you got a computer, internet, and a brain, like you are capable of being able to like learn this stuff and then also joining a team like ours or any other like remote web3 team. So I think it's just a matter of like how hard are you willing to work to be better than I guess the next upcoming talent in some country somewhere
Hmm.
that you may not have thought of that has like some superior talent. So like when we think of like tech cities, like San Francisco or like New York, is just like no, some of these very smart people come from like very remote places.
Hmm.
It's just a matter of like showing up, showing us what you can do, and boom, like we have no problem hiring you if you can do the job. Yeah.
That's, I think, really impressive. And the fact that this is how this is part of the DNA of the way that Chainsafe works and hires developers, I think is really cool to highlight. I also just want to highlight that you have some really cool memorabilia in the background of your video. You've got this like poster built on Ethereum. You have like uh
Like a degree or
a
something.
degree, like, but also like a little icon, like a statue of the Ethereum
Okay. Which one?
diamond on your third shelf, on the third
Oh,
shelf.
nice.
Um, can you highlight? Oh, it's a night lamp
Yeah. So
of the Ethereum.
this was given to core devs during an interop. I forget which one. But it was basically from some people at Lido for the work that we did on the Dankun upgrade.
I love that. Do you have any other like favorite memorabilia you want to highlight?
Um, so the good thing that I do want to highlight is the built on Ethereum stuff. I think it was Wesley or somebody in the community just basically designed up these designs to basically create like this sort of marketing effort of like selling the fact that like you're building on Ethereum or anything like that, kind of similar to um like when people stick like Bitcoin logos and stuff everywhere. Like this actually is a public good that supports core devs, so I think a lot some of the money actually goes to like protocol guild and such. So there's a lot of cool things that come from those guys. They have like a cool like hoodie and stuff, very, very comfortable. So like a lot of like cool things like that that you can purchase. I forget the website though. I'll have to send it to you after.
Yeah, I'm gonna link it in the show notes.
Yeah, cool. And then yeah, some other stuff like that is a bufficorn up there. A bufficorn is the
Explain.
mascot of the ETH Denver meetups. So that's my stuffed bufficorn there. There's this like this is from SpaceX actually. So this is like a rocket. So of course,
A rocket figurine.
yeah, so actually what this thing is a lighter. So actually
Oh,
lights up.
whoa.
Yeah.
Powerful tool.
Yeah, so there's like butane in here and like actually like you can use it to like light stuff up.
And wait, does that have any relation to Ethereum or just a very cool thing you got from
It doesn't.
SpaceX?
It's a cool thing that I got from SpaceX, and it's basically a
Very cool.
torch.
Oh, very cool. Very cool.
And of course,
Well,
everybody has their moon. Yeah, and then I just have like books and my Meta Quest, and like this is from Emirates. I flew on the A380. I'm a big airplane enthusiast as well. So I did some pilot training when I was in the Air Force, so I'm kind of into planes as well.
it's awesome.
Yeah, I
Okay.
have a very interesting like if I were to give you my resume, you would be like, what is this guy doing with his life? He's done so many different things in different areas. Like I didn't even tell you about my life before I actually committed to blockchain. Back in 2012, before I even knew what Bitcoin was, I was working in Los Angeles as a um as a talent coordinator with NBC Casting. So that was like my internship there. I actually went to school for media production and did my internship in LA and was working with the executive VP of casting at NBC. And that was where like I spent like 6 months of my life.
Whoa, so this was before the Air Force.
But this was before the Air Force and before like Bitcoin even. So yeah,
Very cool. What the twists and turns of where like we really don't know where life takes us.
you really don't. Like I never would have guessed that I would end up here. I I was a kid wanting to be like an actor when I was young, and
Mm.
then ended up doing, tech stuff.
And ended up doing podcasts about the tech stuff you're doing.
Yeah, yeah. I would say like the way life kind of works is like you kind of just you, like it's just different chapters, and it's like every chapter builds you up to like this like other life story that you have, and then it's just a matter of like when does that chapter change into something else. But like everything that you learned before that is like somewhat useful to like chapter 15. And it's
Yeah.
like if it wasn't for all these like little things that happened, some people can actually like see it as a bad thing. So I'll give you a quick example with when I was in the Air Force. It was very much like everyone was competing to be the best because you would get cut from Air Force pilot training if you couldn't meet a specific standard in a specific amount of time. So there were like people there who like dreamt of being fighter pilots when they were young. They were like kids growing up watching Top Gun and stuff. And then for whatever reason, their test flights didn't go well. They got axed and cut from the program. Like you would see like grown adult men crying and being like, "Ah, my life is over. Like my dream is done. I'm never going to be like an Air Force like fighter pilot anymore." And, when these little things happen, I don't really see them as like, my life is over. It's like, okay, well, what's the next chapter of your life going to be now that maybe this thing didn't work out for you?
Hmm.
So a lot of people, I guess, like see a roadblock and then they struggle. They're like, like this was all I wanted to do when I was a kid. When I grow up, I wanted to be this. And then they were just, they hit a roadblock. And sometimes, like, even for like fighter pilot training, like, you couldn't be of a certain height. So even if you were too tall, you would be eliminated from the pool. And that's not even your fault, right?
Yeah.
So little things like that is just like, I see these things as like more of like a rite of passage for you to figure out what that next thing is rather than being like, my life is over. This thing didn't work out. And just like, I give up or whatever.
Phil, do you have inklings of what your next chapter looks like at this point, at this time of recording?
I don't know. I mean,
What is this chapter like building you up for in the next?
that's a really good question. I think I'm moving more towards like a mentorship phase. Like, I feel like I want to be able to help the next generation be the ones that build something world changing on Ethereum. Actually like working with like young entrepreneurs, like people who are just like driven to be like the next Amazon or the next Facebook, but of the blockchain world, and actually helping them get to those goals. So maybe I don't know, probably the old men in me talking, but it just feels like I'm more at the place now where I'm ready to like pass a torch to somebody, to really like make Ethereum like 10x better than it is today.
Yeah. I'm
Yeah.
gonna have to follow up with you about that. And that's actually a great place to, I think, tie a bow on our conversation. Um, I want to do a little bit of a quick, very short segment. If do you have a couple more minutes,
Yeah.
Phil?
Yeah. Sure.
I want to do a little bit of a short segment right before we stop the recording. This is a segment I want to do where it's rapid fire. It's just whatever first pops into your head, say it and we move on. It's like a rapid fire
Right.
question thing. Don't
Okay.
think too much about this. Just share what comes pops first into your mind, and I just want to see what your responses are. Okay.
Hey, yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
so I'll start the rapid fire segment now. First question: what do you like most about Ethereum protocol development?
Diverse perspectives.
What do you dislike the most?
When people talk about ETH price.
What do you wish someone told you about jumping into Ethereum protocol development that you wish you knew before going into it?
do do what you can with the time and the situation that you're in just to sell yourself. Yeah. Do you need
This,
that on that or?
yeah, actually, yes.
um, I wish somebody had told me that if I want to contribute to Ethereum, just find a place that I can help and just dive right into it and show them what I'm made of.
Makes sense. And this one I'm asking because I'm Canadian and I love Canada. What's the thing that you love most about Canada?
Nature. I think there's a lot of like hidden gems in Canada that like even I haven't seen all of them, and we're just so lucky to be in like the second largest country in the world with so much great landmass. It's just such a beautiful place, and I hope more people actually get the opportunity to come see it because I know it's difficult to get visas here for other people. So
No, I love that. I'm so biased. I had to ask that question. I'm a true Canadian. Okay, back to Ethereum. What do you think is the most necessary character trait to contribute to Ethereum protocol development?
I've I think you really need that passion and that drive to really motivate yourself to do more than you think you're capable of. I think the people that really stand out the most to me when it comes to looking for talent is actually people who do things that are not asked of them. Sorry, I think that's my Discord.
I was going to say, but no, that's fine. That's fine. That's also real, so that's good. It's good for the
Yeah.
recording. Okay.
Okay.
Thanks, Phil. Okay, that I think was a lot. I've asked all my questions, and I think I'm ready to stop the recording there. But anything else we should dig into before I stop,
Um. Hmm.
or anything else you felt like you wanted to share or say?
Uh. I guess like the one thing I could make like a bit of a shout out, I guess, to like to Lodestar and kind of what we're doing now in terms of where we're pivoting to. So recently at Lodestar, we actually decided to pivot into becoming a hybrid of JavaScript and Zig. So Zig is a new oh sorry, I think I lost you there for a second.
It's the Bezu
Gotta
node
wait till
again. It's
this
the
comes
Bezu
back.
node. It's the syncing of the Bezu node. Damn it.
Ah,
But hopefully, EPBS and all this parallelized execution will fix things. But continue.
yeah, okay. It's just if I need to stop it, I will.
We're near the
Okay,
end anyways.
yeah, so like the thing with Lodestar now, we've actually been seeing more contributors actually show up because we're no longer just a TypeScript client. So we're doing a hybrid JavaScript Zig client now because we've noticed that there's a lot of intricate bottlenecks and stuff that we're facing with being a TypeScript client. So if you are interested in Zig, if you are interested in helping Ethereum, or sorry, Lodestar specifically, reach its next batch of goals, we'd be interested in having you. And if you're looking to contribute to a Zig consensus client, I'd love to hear from you.
Perfect. And are there links and things that I can share at the end of this episode for people who want to get involved in Lodestar and Zig that I can share? Or anything that you'd like to highlight or shout out?
Yeah, I mean, like I would just start with our mono repository. So that's github.com/chainsafe/lodestar. And that's where our main repository is and most of our communications, or come into our Chainsafe Discord. we're all pretty active there, and it's open for anybody to come and chat with us.
Great. Thank you so much, Phil, for the time.
Yeah, no problem, Christine. Thanks for the work that you're doing for Ethereum as well.
Appreciate it.
Thank you for joining me for another episode of Ready for Merge. This was a Meet the Devs interview with Ethereum developer Phil Ngo. Please join me next week for a bi-weekly brief on Ethereum and Bitcoin protocol development. Thanks for listening. Until next time, bye everyone.